"I've been married to Raymond Williams for 12 years, the woman said, and the words hit me like a physical blow to the chest, stealing my breath as I gripped the kitchen counter to keep from falling. I had called this stranger because mail addressed to Mrs. Patricia Williams kept arriving at my house, but she was telling me she'd been married to my husband of 30 years for over a decade. "That's impossible," I said, my voice shaking. "You're lying. This is some kind of scam." But Patricia Williams didn't hang up like a scammer would. Instead, her voice grew smaller, more uncertain. "What does your Raymond look like?" "He's 66, about 6 feet tall, gray hair, brown eyes," I heard myself saying, even as my mind screamed that this was insane. "He works in consulting," she whispered. "Travels to Chicago and Denver for business." The kitchen around me, the same kitchen where I'd been planning Raymond's surprise 65th birthday party just minutes before, suddenly felt like it was spinning. The party supplies scattered across my table, the guest list I'd spent weeks perfecting, the decorations I'd ordered with such excitement, all of it now looked like props in someone else's nightmare. "This can't be real," I whispered, but even as I said it, pieces were clicking into place with the horrible precision that comes from 32 years of postal service training. The mail addressed to Patricia Williams at my address wasn't a mistake. It was evidence. "I think," Patricia said, her voice barely audible, "we need to meet." After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by birthday party supplies for a man who might not be who I thought he was, and I realized that my 32 years of detecting mail fraud had just become the most important qualification of my life. My name is Geraldine Williams, but everyone calls me Jerry. I'm 64 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered my husband had been systematically deceiving me for 12 years, while I unknowingly funded his double life. They thought my trust in our marriage made me blind, that my retirement made me vulnerable, that my love for Raymond made me an easy target. But what they didn't know was that the same attention to detail that had made me a reliable postal worker for 32 years was about to expose the most elaborate fraud of my life and help me reclaim my independence in ways they never saw coming. If this situation resonates with your soul, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. But let me take you back to that Tuesday morning in March, when a single phone call destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. For the past month, mail addressed to Mrs. Patricia Williams had been arriving at my house, 12047 Maple Street. Credit card statements, insurance documents, even a voter registration card, all for Patricia Williams at my address. My professional instincts kicked in. In 32 years of mail handling, I'd seen every kind of addressing mistake possible. This wasn't random. Someone was using my address fraudulently, and as a retired postal worker, I knew I had to report it. So I called the phone number on Patricia's credit card statement, expecting to reach a confused woman who'd given the wrong address to her bank. Instead, I reached a woman who claimed to be married to my husband. "You're lying," I told her again after she described Raymond perfectly. "This is identity theft or some kind of elaborate scam." "I have pictures," Patricia said quietly. "Wedding pictures. From our ceremony 12 years ago." My legs gave out, and I sank into my kitchen chair. "That's impossible. I was married to Raymond 12 years ago. We celebrated our 18th anniversary that year." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "What church did you get married in?" I asked, my postal training taking over, treating this like the fraud investigation it had to be. "St. Mark's Lutheran," she whispered. My blood turned to ice. That was our church. The church where Raymond and I had been members for 20 years. The church where we'd renewed our vows for our 25th anniversary just 5 years ago. "Patricia," I said, my voice steadier now, "what's your address?" 1247 Maple Street. "No," I said firmly. "What's your real address? Where do you actually live?" A pause. 852 Oak Avenue. Oak Avenue. Less than 10 minutes from my house. In the same small town where I'd lived for 15 years, believing I was Raymond's only wife. "I'm coming over," I said. "Wait?" Patricia's voice was shaking now. What if we're both telling the truth?" That's when it hit me. The horrible, impossible truth that my postal-trained mind had been trying to reject. Raymond Williams hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been living 2 complete lives, maintaining 2 complete households, with 2 wives who both believed they were his only wife. And he'd been using my address for Patricia's mail, which meant he'd committed federal mail fraud. I looked around my kitchen, at the birthday party supplies, the decorations for a man who'd been systematically deceiving me for over a decade, and I felt something shift inside me. Not the accommodating wife who made excuses for her husband's business trips, but the methodical postal worker who'd built a career on catching people who thought they could outsmart the system. "Patricia," I said, "bring everything. Every document, every photograph, every piece of mail. Because if Raymond Williams thinks he can run a mail fraud scheme past 2 women, one of whom spent 32 years catching mail fraud for a living, he's about to learn exactly how wrong he is." As I hung up the phone, I realized that the surprise party I'd been planning was about to become a very different kind of surprise. The drive to 852 Oak Avenue felt like traveling to another dimension. Every familiar street corner, every local business I passed, suddenly looked different, knowing that somewhere in this same small town, another woman had been living as Raymond's wife for 12 years. Patricia Morrison. She'd kept her maiden name, she explained when I called back, answered her door looking like she'd seen a ghost. Which, I suppose, she had. We were both ghosts in each other's lives, haunting the same marriage without knowing it. "You look exactly like I imagined," she said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. Her living room was decorated with the same careful attention I'd always put into our home. Family photos covered the mantel, and my heart stopped when I saw them. Raymond at what looked like a Christmas party. Raymond on a beach vacation. Raymond cutting a birthday cake with Happy 60th written in frosting. "When was this taken?" I asked, pointing to the birthday photo. 3 years ago, his 60th. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo from my camera roll. Raymond cutting an identical birthday cake in my kitchen. Same day, same Happy 60th message. Patricia sank onto her couch. "He had 2 birthday parties. 2 of everything," I said, the postal worker in me already cataloging the systematic nature of this deception. "Patricia, show me your wedding photos." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a white photo album. My hands shook as I opened it. There was Raymond in a navy suit, standing next to Patricia in a simple white dress, the date embossed in gold. June 15th, 2012. I pulled out my own phone and scrolled to my photos from that same weekend. There I was, at our church's annual picnic on June 16, 2012, standing next to Raymond in the same navy suit. He'd married Patricia on Saturday and attended a church picnic with me on Sunday. He told me he had food poisoning that Saturday. I whispered. Said he was too sick to come to the picnic setup, but he'd try to make it Sunday if he felt better. Patricia was staring at the photos. He told me he had to work that Sunday, emergency client meeting. The pattern was becoming clear with the horrible precision of a well-organized filing system. For 12 years, Raymond had been using our schedules against each other, creating elaborate lies that kept us separated while he lived 2 complete lives. "Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did Raymond ever mention having financial problems?" She shook her head. "Never. He always said his consulting business was doing well. He pays half our mortgage, utilities, everything." My stomach dropped. "Half? Well, yes, we split everything 50-50. I work at the bank, so I handle most of our finances, but Raymond contributes his share every month." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. "Patricia, Raymond doesn't contribute half of anything to our household. I pay our entire mortgage, all our utilities, groceries, everything. I've been supporting him completely for the past 5 years since he said his business was struggling." The color drained from Patricia's face. "That's impossible. He gives me $1,500 every month." $1,500, I repeated slowly. "Patricia, that's exactly half of my monthly pension from the postal service." We stared at each other as the horrible truth settled between us. Raymond wasn't just living a double life. He was funding his second household with money from his first wife, me. "Show me your bank statements," I said, my postal training kicking into full investigation mode. For the next hour, we spread documents across Patricia's dining room table like evidence in a federal case. Because that's exactly what this was becoming. Her bank statements showed regular deposits from Raymond Williams. My bank statements showed regular withdrawals to RW Consulting. Withdrawals I'd assumed were for Raymond's struggling business expenses. "He's been stealing from me to pay for his life with you," I said, the words tasting bitter. "For 5 years, I've been funding his ability to deceive both of us. But it got worse. So much worse." Patricia pulled out a manila folder. "These are Raymond's travel receipts. He's very organized about his business expenses." I looked at the receipts with growing horror. Hotel stays in Chicago during dates when he'd told me he was visiting his sick brother in Denver. Restaurant charges in Atlanta when he'd claimed to be in meetings in Phoenix. Every single business trip had been a lie, carefully documented and filed away. "Patricia," I said slowly, "Raymond doesn't have a brother in Denver. His only brother lives in Florida." She was quiet for a long moment. "Then he told me his brother in Florida died 2 years ago. Said that's why he was so sad around the holidays." I pulled up my Christmas photos from last year. There was Raymond, laughing and opening presents with his very much alive brother Tom, who'd driven up from Tampa for our annual holiday celebration. "He used his own brother's fake death to explain his mood swings to you," I said, "while he was celebrating Christmas with that same brother at my house." Patricia started crying then. Not the gentle tears of sadness, but the harsh sobs of someone whose entire reality was crumbling. "Jerry," she whispered, "what kind of person does this? What kind of person maintains 2 complete families for 12 years? I thought about my 32 years of postal service, all the fraud cases I'd seen, all the elaborate schemes people created to steal money or avoid responsibility. But I'd never seen anything like this. This wasn't just fraud. This was systematic identity theft on an emotional level. The kind of person," I said, "who thinks he's smarter than everyone else, who thinks he can manipulate 2 women indefinitely because we love him too much to question his lies." I looked around Patricia's living room, at the photos of the man I'd thought was my devoted husband, at the evidence of a 12-year deception that had been funded by my own retirement money, and I felt something shift inside me. "Patricia," I said, "Raymond made one critical mistake. He committed mail fraud by using my address for your accounts, and financial fraud by stealing my pension money. But more than that, he underestimated exactly who he was dealing with." I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence spread across her table. "What are you doing?" Patricia asked. "What I should have done the moment I realized what was happening," I said. "I'm building a federal case. Because if Raymond Williams thinks he can run a systematic fraud operation past a retired postal worker, he's about to discover that some people don't just get mad, they get methodical." The birthday party supplies were still scattered across my kitchen table when I got home. But now they looked different. Not like decorations for a celebration, but like props in the biggest lie of my life. I had 6 days until Raymond's surprise party. 6 days to decide whether to confront him privately or expose his 12-year deception in front of everyone we knew. But first, I had some phone calls to make, starting with the postal inspector's office. Because Raymond Williams was about to learn that some surprises cut both ways. The postal inspector's office hadn't changed much since my retirement. Same fluorescent lights, same institutional carpet, same sense of methodical justice that had drawn me to postal service in the first place. But sitting across from Inspector Janet Rodriguez, I wasn't the retired employee seeking help. I was a victim presenting evidence of federal crimes. "Mrs. Williams," Inspector Rodriguez said, reviewing the documents I'd organized with the same precision I'd used for 32 years. "This is one of the most systematic cases of mail fraud I've seen, using your address for another person's financial accounts, then using your pension to fund that fraud. We're looking at multiple federal violations." "How long has this been going on?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. She pulled out a timeline she'd constructed from my evidence. Based on these documents, the mail fraud started 12 years ago, right around the time of his second marriage. But the financial fraud, stealing your pension money, that began 5 years ago. 5 years. The same time Raymond had told me his consulting business was struggling and he needed my help with expenses. The same time I'd started paying for everything while he claimed to be barely keeping his business afloat. Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. In all these years, did anyone ever try to warn you? Any friends, family members, people in your community who might have seen Raymond with Patricia? The question hit me like a physical blow because suddenly, I was remembering things I'd dismissed at the time. Jenny, the postal carrier, and her strange reaction when I mentioned Raymond's birthday party. The cashier at Miller's Grocery, who'd said, "Tell your husband I said hi," when Raymond was supposedly out of town. The awkward silence at church when I'd mentioned Raymond's business trips. "Oh my God," I whispered. They knew. People in town knew. Inspector Rodriguez nodded grimly. In a town of 8,000 people, it's almost impossible to maintain this kind of deception without someone noticing. The question is, how many people saw Raymond with both women and chose not to say anything? I thought about our church congregation, our neighbors, the local businesses where we'd all shopped for years. How many people had seen Raymond with Patricia and decided it wasn't their business to tell me? How many had watched me plan anniversary celebrations and birthday parties while knowing my husband was living a double life? "There's something else," Inspector Rodriguez said. "We ran a preliminary check on Raymond's financial records. Mrs. Williams, your husband doesn't have a consulting business. He never has." The room seemed to tilt. "What do you mean?" "There's no business license, no tax filings, no client records. For the past 12 years, Raymond Williams has been unemployed. His only income has been your pension and whatever Patricia contributes to their household." I stared at her, trying to process this information. "But he leaves for business trips. He has meetings, clients, travel schedules. He has a very elaborate system of lies," she said gently. "Mrs. Williams, your husband is what we call a professional manipulator. This level of systematic deception requires incredible planning and coordination. He's been managing 2 complete households, 2 sets of relationships, 2 different versions of himself for over a decade." The weight of it hit me all at once, not just the bigamy, not just the financial fraud, but the sheer scope of the deception. Every conversation we'd had about his work, every time I'd worried about his business struggles, every dollar I'd given him to help with his consulting expenses, all of it had been lies. How did I not see it? I asked, more to myself than to Inspector Rodriguez. "Because you trusted him," she said, "and because he's very good at what he does." Mrs. Williams, in my 20 years of investigating fraud, I've learned that the most successful con artists don't target strangers. They target people who love them, because love makes us want to believe. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for Raymond's behavior. The missed dinners I'd attributed to work stress. The phone calls he'd taken private that he'd claimed were difficult clients. The way he'd always seemed to know exactly when I'd be busy or distracted. He was managing us, I said, the realization hitting me like a revelation. Like a schedule, making sure Patricia and I never crossed paths, never had reason to question his stories. Exactly, and he used your own kindness against you. Your willingness to support his struggling business funded his ability to deceive you both. Inspector Rodriguez leaned forward. "Mrs. Williams, I need you to understand something. What Raymond has done isn't just morally wrong, it's a federal crime. Mail fraud, wire fraud, bigamy in some jurisdictions. We have enough evidence to prosecute." "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on what you want to happen. We can arrest him immediately, or," she paused, studying my face, "or we can give you time to handle this your way first. You mentioned he has a birthday party planned." I thought about the party supplies still scattered across my kitchen table. The guest list of 60 people who'd known Raymond for years. The same people who might have seen him with Patricia and chosen to stay silent. "Inspector Rodriguez," I said slowly, "what if I told you I wanted to give Raymond one last surprise party?" She smiled, the first time I'd seen her smile since I'd walked into her office. "Mrs. Williams, as long as you don't interfere with our investigation, how you choose to reveal the truth to your community is entirely up to you." I left the postal inspector's office with a federal case number and a new understanding of exactly who I'd been married to for 30 years. Not the devoted husband I'd thought, but a systematic manipulator who'd built his entire life on lies. But Raymond had made one critical error in his calculations. He'd assumed that my love for him made me weak, that my trust made me blind, that my retirement made me irrelevant. He'd forgotten that I'd spent 32 years catching people who thought they were smarter than the system. As I drove home, I made a decision. Raymond Williams wanted a surprise party for his 65th birthday. He was going to get one, just not the kind he was expecting. I had 3 days to plan the most important presentation of my life, and this time, I wouldn't be the one getting surprised. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that comes from 32 years of methodical problem solving. Raymond was still in Denver for 3 more days, which gave me exactly the time I needed to prepare for the most important confrontation of my life. I started the way I'd started every fraud investigation during my postal career, with documentation. My dining room table became command central. On one side, I spread out 12 years of Raymond's business trip schedules, cross-referenced with Patricia's bank statements showing his deposits. On the other side, I laid out 5 years of my pension withdrawals to RW Consulting, $78,000 of my retirement money that had funded his double life. But I needed more than financial records. I needed witnesses. My first call was to Patricia. "I need you to do something that's going to be difficult," I told her. "I need you to act normal when Raymond comes home tomorrow. Don't let him know we've met." "Jerry, I don't think I can pretend." "Patricia, listen to me. I spent 32 years catching people who thought they could outsmart federal investigators. Raymond has been managing us for 12 years because we didn't know about each other. But now we do, and that gives us the advantage." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "What are you planning?" "Justice," I said simply. "But I need your help. Can you get Raymond to commit to being at his birthday party Saturday night? Tell him you have plans with friends, that you'll be out of town. Make sure he has no reason to suspect you'll be anywhere near my house." "You're going to expose him at the party?" "I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves. In front of everyone who's known him for years, including the people who saw him with you and chose to stay silent." After I hung up, I made my second call, to my neighbor Margaret Chen, who'd been our friend for 15 years. "Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you ever seen Raymond with another woman?" The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. "Jerry," she finally said, her voice small, "I didn't know how to tell you." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "Tell me now." "About 6 months ago, I saw him at the farmer's market with a woman. They were holding hands, looking at vegetables like a married couple. I thought maybe you were out of town, that she was a relative or something. But then I saw them kiss. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to be wrong. Because I hoped there was an explanation. Because—" She started crying. "Because I was a coward, Jerry. I'm so sorry." "Margaret, how many other people do you think saw them together?" "I don't know. But Jerry, if I saw them once, other people must have seen them too." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not the diminished woman who'd been making excuses for her husband's absences, but the competent postal inspector who'd built a career on exposing fraud. I pulled out my address book, the same systematic organization I'd used for decades, and started making calls. "Hello, Mrs. Patterson. This is Jerry Williams. I'm calling about Raymond's surprise party Saturday night." "Yes, I know it's short notice, but I wanted to make sure you could come. It's going to be very special." One by one, I called every person on Raymond's guest list, but I wasn't just confirming attendance. I was listening for hesitation, for awkward pauses, for the telltale signs of people who knew more than they were saying. By Thursday afternoon, I'd identified at least 6 people who'd reacted strangely when I mentioned Raymond's party. 6 people who'd probably seen him with Patricia and chosen to stay silent. That evening, I drove to Patricia's house with a manila folder full of documents. "I need you to understand something," I told her as we sat in her living room. Saturday night isn't just about exposing Raymond. It's about exposing everyone who enabled him, everyone who saw him with you and decided it wasn't their responsibility to tell me. Patricia looked through the documents I'd prepared, copies of everything, organized with the same precision I'd used for federal investigations. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "I want you to come to the party." Her face went white. "Jerry, I can't face all those people." "Patricia, listen to me. For 12 years, Raymond has controlled both of our lives by keeping us separated. He's used our isolation against us. But Saturday night, we're going to stand together. We're going to show him and everyone else that his victims aren't going to hide in shame anymore." I pulled out my phone and showed her the federal case number Inspector Rodriguez had given me. "This isn't just about personal betrayal anymore. This is about federal crimes, mail fraud, wire fraud, systematic financial theft. Raymond is going to face prosecution whether we confront him publicly or not. But if we do this together, we send a message to everyone who enabled him." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Then, what exactly are you planning?" I opened my laptop and showed her the presentation I'd been working on. 12 slides, organized like the fraud cases I'd presented to federal prosecutors. Timeline of the deception, financial evidence, photographic proof, witness statements. "I'm going to give Raymond the birthday presentation of his life," I said, "and you're going to be there to verify every single fact." Patricia stared at the screen. This is incredibly thorough." 32 years of Postal Service training," I said. "When you build a federal case, you don't leave anything to chance." Friday morning, I made my final preparation. I called Inspector Rodriguez. "Mrs. Williams, are you sure you want to handle it this way?" "Inspector, Raymond Williams has spent 12 years thinking he's smarter than everyone around him. He's manipulated 2 women, stolen federal pension money, and committed mail fraud right under the nose of a retired postal worker. Tomorrow night, he's going to learn that some people don't just get mad, they get methodical. And if he tries to leave, if he realizes what's happening and attempts to flee," I smiled, feeling more confident than I had in years. "Inspector, I've spent 3 decades making sure people couldn't escape the consequences of their actions. Raymond Williams isn't going anywhere." Saturday morning, I woke up and looked at myself in the mirror. Not the accommodating wife who'd been planning birthday parties while funding her husband's lies, but the competent professional who'd built a career on exposing fraud. Raymond was coming home that afternoon, expecting a surprise party. He was going to get one, just not the kind he'd planned for. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharp and clear. I stood in my living room, watching our guests arrive for Raymond's surprise party, and I felt calmer than I had in weeks. 60 people who'd known Raymond for years, including at least 6 who'd seen him with Patricia and chosen to stay silent. Raymond walked through the door at exactly 7 o'clock, right on schedule. Always punctual, my husband had to be when you're managing 2 complete lives. "Surprise!" everyone shouted, and Raymond's face lit up with what looked like genuine joy. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Jerry, this is incredible," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like embracing a stranger. "You've outdone yourself." "Oh, Raymond," I said, my voice steady and clear, "you have no idea what I've prepared for you tonight." For the first hour, everything proceeded like a normal birthday party. People mingled, shared stories about Raymond, toasted his 65 years. I played the perfect hostess, making sure everyone had drinks, that the food was perfectly arranged, that every detail was exactly right. Because when you're about to destroy someone's life in front of 60 witnesses, the presentation matters. At 8:30, I tapped my wine glass with a spoon. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please. I'd like to make a special presentation for Raymond's birthday." The room quieted, faces turning toward me with the expectant smiles people wear at birthday celebrations. Raymond beamed, probably expecting a heartfelt speech about our 30 years together. I walked to the front of the room where I'd set up my laptop and projector. The same equipment I'd used for Postal Service presentations for 3 decades. 30 years ago, I married a man I thought I knew completely. I began, my voice carrying the authority that comes from years of presenting evidence to federal investigators. Tonight, I want to share with all of you what I've learned about who Raymond Williams really is. The first slide appeared on my wall, the Raymond Williams investigation, a federal case study. I heard someone gasp. Raymond's smile faltered. Slide 1, I continued, my voice steady as granite. For the past 12 years, Raymond Williams has been married to 2 women simultaneously. This is called bigamy, and it's a federal crime. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Raymond's face went white. "Jerry, what are you doing?" he said, his voice shaking. "I'm giving you the birthday presentation you deserve, Raymond. Please don't interrupt." I clicked to the next slide, a photo of Raymond and Patricia's wedding, dated June 15, 20. This is Raymond's second wedding, which took place while he was legally married to me. The woman in the photo is Patricia Morrison, who has been living as Mrs. Raymond Williams for 12 years. Margaret Chen, my neighbor, made a strangled sound. "Oh my God, Jerry." Slide 3, I continued, clicking forward to show financial records. For the past 5 years, Raymond has been stealing my postal service pension to fund his second household. $78,000 of my retirement money has been used to support his bigamous marriage. Raymond started toward me, but I held up my hand. "Raymond, I wouldn't move if I were you. You see, everyone here tonight is now a witness to your reaction to federal evidence. I'd hate for you to do something that makes this worse for you than it already is." I clicked to the next slide, a timeline showing Raymond's business trips cross-referenced with Patricia's bank deposits. Raymond doesn't have a consulting business. He never has. For 12 years, his only job has been managing 2 wives who didn't know about each other. Every business trip was a lie. Every client meeting was fiction. Every dollar I gave him for business expenses went directly to funding his life with his second wife. The room was dead silent now. I could see people's faces, shock, horror, and on some faces, the guilty recognition of people who'd suspected but said nothing. "But here's what Raymond didn't count on," I said, clicking to a slide showing my postal service credentials. He married a woman who spent 32 years investigating federal fraud. And when you commit mail fraud against a retired postal inspector, you don't just get caught, you get methodically destroyed. That's when the front door opened and Patricia walked in. The gasps that followed were audible throughout the room. Patricia looked terrified but determined, clutching a folder of documents. "Everyone," I said, "I'd like you to meet Patricia Morrison, Raymond's wife of 12 years. Raymond's legs seemed to give out. He sank into the nearest chair, his face gray. "Patricia," I continued, "would you like to tell our guests about the life you've been living with Raymond?" Patricia's voice shook, but she spoke clearly. "For 12 years, I thought I was Raymond's only wife. I thought his business trips were real. I thought the money he gave me came from his consulting work. 3 days ago, Jerry called me because my mail was being delivered to her house, and I learned that everything I believed about my marriage was a lie." I clicked to the final slide, the federal case number and Inspector Rodriguez's contact information. Raymond Williams is currently under federal investigation for mail fraud, wire fraud, and bigamy. The Postal Inspector's office has enough evidence to prosecute. But before they arrest him, I wanted everyone who's known Raymond for years to understand exactly who they've been celebrating. I looked around the room at faces I'd known for decades. I also wanted everyone who saw Raymond with Patricia over the years and chose not to tell me to understand that your silence enabled 12 years of systematic fraud. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Raymond finally found his voice. "Jerry, please, we can work this out. We can—" "Raymond," I said, my voice cutting through his pleading like a blade. "The only thing we're going to work out is whether you turn yourself in to the postal inspector's office Monday morning, or whether they come to arrest you." I closed my laptop and looked around the room one final time. "The party's over," I said. "Everyone who enabled this fraud by staying silent, you know who you are. Everyone who genuinely didn't know, I apologize for learning about it this way. But Raymond Williams needed to face the truth in front of the community he's been deceiving. As people filed out in stunned silence, Raymond sat in his chair, looking like a man whose entire world had just collapsed. Which, of course, it had. Patricia and I stood together, two women who'd been systematically deceived, but were no longer victims. We were survivors, and we were done being silent. 3 months later, I stood in the same kitchen where I'd first received Patricia's misdirected mail, but everything had changed. The federal case had moved swiftly. Raymond pled guilty to mail fraud, wire fraud, and bigamy, receiving 18 months in federal prison and full restitution of my stolen pension money. But more importantly, I had changed. The woman who used to make excuses for her husband's absences was gone. In her place stood someone I'd forgotten existed, the competent postal inspector who'd spent 32 years solving problems and holding people accountable. Patricia and I had become unlikely friends, bonded by shared experience and mutual respect. She'd moved back to her hometown in Ohio to start fresh, but we talked every week. Two women who'd been systematically deceived but refused to be defined by someone else's lies. "You know what's funny?" Patricia had said during our last phone call. "I spent 12 years thinking I wasn't enough for Raymond, wondering why he traveled so much, why he seemed distracted. Turns out the problem was never that I wasn't enough. The problem was that he was living a lie so big it required 2 complete lives to maintain it." The community response had been mixed, exactly as I'd expected. Some people apologized for their silence, admitting they'd suspected something but hadn't known how to approach me. Others avoided me entirely, uncomfortable with their own complicity. But the people who mattered, my real friends, had rallied around me with support I hadn't expected. Margaret Chen had become one of my strongest allies. "Jerry," she'd said the week after the party, "I've learned something important. Staying silent to avoid discomfort isn't kindness, it's cowardice. And I'm never going to be a coward again when someone I care about is being hurt." The church had been more complicated. Some members struggled with the public nature of Raymond's exposure, feeling I should have handled it privately. But Pastor Williams, no relation to Raymond, thankfully, had supported me completely. "Jerry," he'd said, "what Raymond did wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was systematic fraud that required community enablement. Sometimes the truth needs to be revealed publicly so that healing can begin publicly." My new life had structure and purpose in ways I hadn't experienced since retirement. I'd started volunteering with the Postal Inspector's Office, helping train new investigators in fraud detection. My 32 years of experience, combined with my recent personal case, made me uniquely qualified to spot the patterns that others might miss. "Mrs. Williams," Inspector Rodriguez had said when she offered me the consulting position, "you've turned your victimization into expertise. That's exactly the kind of perspective we need." I'd also started speaking at community groups about financial fraud awareness, particularly targeting older adults who might be vulnerable to systematic manipulation. My story had become a teaching tool, helping others recognize the warning signs I'd missed for so long. But the most important change was internal. I'd reclaimed my voice, not just the professional competence I'd always had, but the personal authority I'd somehow lost during 30 years of accommodating Raymond's lies. Last week, I'd been at Miller's Grocery when the cashier, the same one who'd mentioned seeing Raymond with his wife, approached me nervously. "Mrs. Williams, I owe you an apology. I saw your husband with that other woman multiple times over the years, and I should have said something." The old me would have made excuses for her, would have minimized the situation to make her feel better. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said, "You're right, you should have. But you can make different choices going forward." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I will. I promise I will." That's the thing about transformation. It's not just personal. When you stop accepting unacceptable behavior, you give other people permission to do the same. My financial situation had stabilized completely. The restitution from Raymond, combined with my pension and the consulting work with the Postal Service, had actually left me more secure than I'd been in years. I'd used some of the money to renovate my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd planned Raymond's birthday party, but now it felt like mine again. I'd also started dating, something I never thought I'd do at 64. Nothing serious yet, but I'd joined a hiking group for seniors, and discovered that there were men my age who were honest, straightforward, and genuinely interested in partnership rather than manipulation. The difference, I'd told Patricia during one of our calls, is that I know who I am now. I know what I bring to a relationship, and I know what I won't accept. Raymond was able to deceive me because I'd forgotten my own worth. My relationship with my extended family had also shifted. Raymond's relatives had initially been angry about the public exposure, but as the federal case proceeded and the evidence became undeniable, most had come around. His brother Tom had even called to apologize. "Jerry, I had no idea. If I'd known what Raymond was doing, I would have stopped it. You deserved so much better." But perhaps the most meaningful change was how I viewed my 32 years of postal service. For too long, I'd seen my retirement as an ending, a transition to irrelevance. Now I understood that those decades of experience had been preparation for the most important investigation of my life. "You know what I've learned?" I said to a group of women at my latest fraud awareness presentation. "The skills that make you good at your job: attention to detail, systematic thinking, documentation, following procedures. Those skills don't become irrelevant when you retire. They become tools for protecting yourself and others." A woman in the audience raised her hand. "But what if you miss the signs? What if you trust someone who's lying to you?" "Then you use your skills to uncover the truth," I said. "And you remember that being deceived doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. But staying deceived once you know the truth, that's a choice." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 months ago, planning birthday parties for a man who was systematically stealing from me, making excuses for behavior that should have been unacceptable, funding lies with my own retirement money. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, and more purposeful than I'd been in years. Raymond had thought my love made me weak, my trust made me blind, my retirement made me irrelevant. He'd been wrong on all counts. And now, every day, I wake up knowing exactly who I am and what I'm worth. At 64, I've learned that it's never too late to reclaim your life from someone else's lies. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't getting even. It's becoming who you were always meant to be.